Welcome back to the alligator pit where it's treacherous and dangerous, man. Treacherous and dangerous. So for this classic, we're going to head back to the Green Box. I saw in one of the old Green Box politics, a gentleman asked me about the origins of Crips and Bloods in Clayton County streets. That's basically what he was asking me. What is the history of Crips and Bloods influence in Clayton County streets? All right. So I figure, this would be a good video on tribal warfare and gangs in Clayton County, Georgia. That's ultimately what the topic and the subject matter of the video is. And, most of what I'm talking about is coming from an objective and a subjective viewpoint. Objectively, a lot of people, if you grew up in Clayton County or one of the cities in the late 90s, early 2000s, elementary, middle, high school, or out of high school age, if you was in your early 20s during this time period, then objectively you can attest to a lot of what I'm talking about. And then subjectively, since I grew up in Riverdale, I'm going to give you all my own accounts and my own memories of, when I started to see Crips and Bloods down there. But that's going to be the topic of the video, okay? So for one, Clayton County, Georgia is basically a large portion of the Hartsfield-Jackson Airport. So if you are from out of state, if you've ever flown to Atlanta, when you got off of the airplane and you went to your destination in Atlanta or any surrounding metropolitan area, you arrived in Clayton County. So geographically, that's where it is, okay? And Clayton County also is on the south and the southwest end of Fulton County, all right? So Clayton County and Atlanta, even though they're right by each other, but they're two different things. So me personally, I grew up in Riverdale or Clayton County. I don't consider myself from Atlanta or Fulton County, even though what we call Atlanta culture, basically is, it's Atlanta and the surrounding areas. But, those surrounding metropolitan areas, they have their own identity, basically. All right. So Clayton County and Fulton County are two different things. And they have been influencing each other for a variety of reasons. And as far as like the people that are in the streets of Clayton County right now, and during the 90s and early 2000s, it was a mixed multitude of people. All right. So you had people coming from a little bit of everywhere. All right. You had people that lived in the inner city, and they may have lived in, like I say, either zone 1 through zone 6. That's the police precinct that makes up Atlanta. And the Atlanta aspect of Fulton County, you had to live in one of those zone areas. But when they started to tear those apartments and projects down, a lot of those people in the late 90s and early 2000s started to move down to Clayton County. They were moving down to Riverdale, College Park, East Point, because those were the closest areas to, zone 1, zone 4, and zone 3. Okay. So when they started to change around a lot of the Atlanta inner city landscape in the late 90s, early to mid 2000s, and part of that plan was to take down those projects that had been there, because the Atlanta projects are some of the oldest in the country. Okay. If I remember correctly, Techwood Homes is one of our oldest ones that goes back to the 1920s, I believe. So during the 96 Olympics, that's when they saw that they can make a whole lot more money in Atlanta. We can use Atlanta for something bigger nationally. So part of that is we got to clean up this inner city so-called black community, these people that have really been here for quite some time. So these inner city people that have been in Fulton County, going back to the 1920s, they started to, clean some of them out. And those people came to Clayton County. So that's one group of people in Clayton County. Another group of people are people coming from other states. So let's say that if your parents moved to Clayton County sometime in the late 90s or early 2000s, because you had a couple of new neighborhoods being built, and you had homes that were already there that were available for, rent and purchase as well. So during the late 90s, early 2000s, that suburban aspect of like Riverdale, College Park, people were moving into these homes, okay? So you had people coming from other states, people coming from California, people coming from Illinois, people coming from New York, And it's the reason why I'm naming those three places, because you had a large influx, people coming from Louisiana or New Orleans, Baton Rouge, you know what I'm saying? So growing up, I can remember in the late 90s, early 2000s, when I was in elementary and early middle school years, we had a lot of new friends that were from California, that were from Chicago, that were from New York, that were from Louisiana. I remember them from Florida. I remember those being like the main groups, especially people from like California and Louisiana and New York. We were meeting a lot of those people, you know what I'm saying, in the 90s and early 2000s. And when they were coming to Clayton County, they were bringing their own style, their own culture, and whatever they had going on back in California, Louisiana, and New York, and wherever they were coming from, right? So that's your second group. And then your third group are people coming from different parts of Georgia. All right. So you got the state of Georgia, which is, of course, more than Atlanta. And people may be coming from Savannah. People may be coming from Statesboro. People may be coming from Dublin, all these different parts of Georgia, and may have been moving to Atlanta for different opportunities in the 1960s, 70s, or 80s. So for example, myself, my mother grew up in Southwest Georgia, but when it was time for her to attend college, she came to Atlanta in the early 1980s. Okay. So when she had children in Atlanta, and we grew up here. And then when she had a little bit more, resources, she was able to move to Clayton County. All right. So those are your three groups of people that made up the Clayton County streets. People coming from the inner city of Atlanta, people whose parents were coming from different parts of Georgia, and people who were coming from different states. And all these different cultures from all these different places are coming into a melting pot in Clayton County through their children. Because think back on when you were a child. When you would be in the house, you would do your homework or do your chores. And then at some point, you're going to ask your parents if you can go outside. All right. You wanted to go outside and play, discover, and just use your imagination and energy as a child. Right. And when you would go outside to play, sometimes you would be in the front yard. Sometimes you would be in the backyard. But if you were very inquisitive, if you were sociable and knew how to network, and you just liked going on journeys, you would venture out beyond your house or beyond the front porch or beyond your driveway. You may start walking down the street, or you may start going 2 streets over. Then you may start leaving the neighborhood. And as you're doing this, you're meeting other young children who are doing the same thing, other young males and females of the so-called black community that are coming outside to play. So that's really ultimately where the streets started. It started when you would go outside in your youth. And, you had different activities. You would play basketball, football, baseball, play fighting, slap boxing, different stuff like that we was doing in elementary and high school and middle school. All right. So that's where you get the foundation of the streets. And then these people start to grow up together. All right. That's also where you get these tribal affiliations, the origins of them. Because like I say, you may have the neighborhood or the street you from, but then you start meeting the other people in the neighborhood. And then now you all have created a tribal affiliation. But then let's say you all start going to other neighborhoods to play basketball or football, or maybe you got a girlfriend in that neighborhood or something like that. Now you're making affiliations with them. And then you already in, let's say, early middle school age now. So now you're going to other neighborhoods with people that go to school. They inviting you over. So that's what was starting to also happen, not only in Clayton County, but throughout all so-called black communities across America. When we start to make these little tribal affiliations in our neighborhoods and streets, no different than some American Indian stuff. All right. Now, once it turns into criminal element and violence, that's negative. But the tribal affiliations and just these groups and us having that natural inclination to come together, yeah, that's real and that's ancient. So the third thing that happens is you have the influence of the music. Because when you out in the streets, you learning about different things and you hearing different music. And the music had a powerful effect on the Clayton County streets in the late 90s, early 2000s. Now, during this time period, of course, you're going to have children and early teenagers that listen to music of all types of artists, because everybody got a different personality, different flavor, different energy, and a different vibe. But what I can say that was something consistent and it was pervasive throughout Clayton County during that late 90s, early 2000s, The Memphis horrorcore street rap cultural influence coming from Tennessee was powerful. Like that Memphis street rap had a powerful effect on Clayton County, and the tribal affiliations and what we would turn them tribal affiliations into. The Memphis street rap had a powerful effect on it, because I know personally at that time, you know, I wasn't really into like the whole Goody Mob, Outkast. I mean, that music was cool. Don't get me wrong. You know, Ludacris, Georgia and Atlanta always had different artists. You know, Pastor Troy, but at that time, Atlanta didn't really have a Memphis horrorcore street rap type of culture yet. That didn't come till a little bit later, you know, and it started to morph and hybrid off of some of this influence in Clayton County. But yeah, at that time period, the late 90s, early 2000s, the Atlanta artists were still making more like dance music, you know, party music and stuff like that. You know, if you had a couple of gangster artists, it wasn't that many. And it wasn't like mainstream Atlanta artists. Like I say, late 90s, early 2000s, Atlanta's still known for like more of the dancing music. You know, the roller rinks, you know what I'm saying? The girls booty shaking at the house parties, you know, like that type of music. You know, it wasn't really like a street gangster rap type energy yet. At that time period, though, Memphis had it. You know what I'm saying? Because, you know, when we was growing up in Riverdale, if I was in elementary and middle school, then that mean the older guys, they were the ones listening to it, because they put us up on it, you know. So like our older brothers, older cousins, older homeboys and stuff like that, they put us on that music, and it had a powerful effect, you know, and that had a certain influence on the culture, the music. So now that I kind of laid the foundation on, you know, who the people were, a lot of the violence that was going on in the streets in Clayton County, it wasn't really about drug money. Because, see, at the time, the inner city of Atlanta, you know, the different projects, you know, of the, you know, 70s and 80s and 90s, like the heroin deals, you know, the cocaine and the crack deals, you know what I'm saying? Like, that was already going on in the inner city of Atlanta. So they were having different crews and, you know, tribal affiliations, but a lot of it was based on that money game. Because in the inner city, that's where all the big money was. That's where the big drugs were. And the different projects, they was using them as, you know, different trap houses. And also, too, that's where a lot of the people were living. But they would be trapping out of them as well. You know, and different abandos all across the city, different apartment complexes. So a lot of the violence that was going on in Fulton County in the inner city, you had your like spontaneous, like, you know, violence, but a lot of it like was coming from the drug gang, because they was getting money in the inner city. So that was the theme of their violence, or some of the reasons behind the violence in the inner city. A lot of it was the drug gang. Now, of course, today it has more of a like killings just for gang influence only. But the truth is that Clayton County and Riverdale and College Park, those were some of the first places that were having street gang violence that had nothing to do with money. It was strictly Viking warfare. It was strictly wild Indian warfare. It ain't had nothing to do with no trap houses. It ain't had nothing to do with no packs. It didn't have nothing to do with none of that. It was just strictly guerrilla warfare violence. And it didn't have no money, big money reasons behind it. Now, did you probably have some older guys in the late 90s and early 2000s that was trapping and doing stuff like that? Of course. Because, I mean, we used to see them. They used to be around. But the people that was in middle school, high school, when the gang warfare started with us, it wasn't about really no money. It was more about, like I said, just some wild Viking shit, just be honest with you. Whereas in the inner city of Atlanta, see, they had drug territories, like I say, trap houses and all this type of stuff. So that's what started a lot of their gang violence and warfare, you know, because it was money on the line. But Clayton County, it was just violence just for bloodshed, just for bloodthirst. That's why I use that term Viking. And it's very interesting, too, that the middle school I went to, Point South, shout out to all my Point South niggas, the mascot is the Vikings. And Riverdale, it's the Raiders. So what is a Raider and a Viking? It's somebody that just wants pure bloodshed. So I find that very interesting that, or maybe that's just my personality and the energy that I receive from it. But yeah, I was on some real Viking and some real Raider shit back then. That's where the whole Blackbeard thing come from, when y'all see me use the skull and crossbones and stuff. But anyway, moving on. So now let's go into these out-of-state gangs and when I started to see them show up. So the first gang I was really seeing, or at least I saw a person or knew a person that talked about it, or you may have thought had some type of knowledge of it, it was the Crips. Because when I met one of the guys in the neighborhood, his older brother, they were from California. And his older brother already was like in his mid to late teens when I met them. And I was probably, I may have been like 10 or 11. Because his brother that I was hanging with is a year older than me. But the big brother, though, he was already like 15, 16, coming from California. So that means he already knew about Crips and Bloods. He already had been put on to how to move in the streets from being in the California culture. So when he came to Georgia, and he the big brother of the neighborhood. I remember being over their house one time and they had a picture of a bunch of blue old school vehicles. And it looked like a picture that they had probably taken when they lived in California. But I just remember seeing that. But he never really talked about no Crip stuff or tried to get any of the young guys in the neighborhood. Never really did that. So in the late 90s and early 2000s, I may have been a damn child in an early teen. But I'm pretty sure the dudes that was in their mid-teens, late teens, early 20s, mid-20s, and probably 30s, yeah, some of them was already Crips. And then some of them was GDs too. So them really were the first gangs that I was seeing. It was more Crips and GDs. Now I learned about the GDs because, long story short, one time when I was in high school, after eating breakfast, man, I had to go to the bathroom to wipe my face and stuff like that, right? So we can get ready to report for homeroom. So I go to the bathroom to wash my hands, but while I'm in the bathroom washing my hands, I see a bunch of dudes come in with all black. It was probably about eight or nine of them, right? So they came in the bathroom and they walked to the back of the bathroom. They had on all black and they looked real militant. And long story short, they started beating this one dude up. Like they was holding a meeting, and I guess one of the dudes committed a foul play. So the enforcer, I just saw them just start beating the dude up, right? Now mind you, this ain't got nothing to do with me, so I'm just I'm watching or whatever. I kind of laughed and moved on, got on out of there. But anyway, the police and the principal and everybody, I guess when the dude got beat up, he went and told the teacher, he told the police. So they came and locked everybody up that was in that bathroom. And I was in there. So they saw me on the camera going in there and coming out. But they didn't know that I didn't have anything to do with it. But going through that whole situation, and this was the fall and the winter of 2004. This was the fall and winter of 2004. Yeah, this is the fall and winter of 2004. So this would have been my first semester of 10th grade. And this was that fall and winter. So that's when I first learned what GDs were, because those dudes was GDs, you know what I'm saying? And I just ended up finding out by talking to him and learning, because one of them I knew him, but I didn't know that he was in like a gang or nothing like that, a GD and stuff. But anyway, that's when I learned about GDs. And that was, like I said, the fall, winter of 2004. But once again, y'all, I'm young at this time. So the older guys, they was already on that. So yeah, the Crips and the GDs, they was already around. But, a lot of the little gangs that we were creating and stuff at that time, it wasn't GD or Crip influence. Like the older guys, they weren't putting us on with that. As a matter of fact, now that I look back on it, they really kept a lot of that from us. They didn't tell us about no Crip and GD shit. Like we were more on some Riverdale, Clayton County shit. You know what I'm saying? Some Taylor Road shit. Some Palisade shit. You know what I'm saying? Some Flint River shit. Some 138 shit. Some 85 shit. You know what I'm saying? Some Godby Road Hit Squad shit. Some Southside Mafia shit. You know what I'm saying? We had our own stuff going on based on where we were from. We weren't gonna claim something from out of state because that's them people's stuff. You know, that's how we looked at it back then. But that's the history of like the Crips and the Bloods. You know, now as far as in other parts of Fulton County, now they probably already had some shit going on too. You know, they had some shit going on too, and College Park and stuff like that. Because when the guys was coming from California, they started moving into these apartments, moving into these projects, moving into these neighborhoods of Fulton County, DeKalb County, and Clayton County. And the ones that was Crips coming from California, and the ones that was real GDs coming from Chicago, yeah, that's facts. Them niggas definitely was moving into Atlanta and moving into Clayton County in the late 90s, early 2000s, and they brought that California Crip swag with them for sure. That big GD swag with them for sure. Like, they did. And them niggas was mobbing shit. It was just, I was so young, I didn't know that that's what that was. But yeah, they definitely was, though. They definitely was. Now, as far as the blood influence, the first time I saw somebody that was a blood is when I was probably like 14, maybe, yeah, probably, yeah, 13, 14 years old. It was one of the older brothers. You know what I'm saying? He was from Omaha. You know, and at that time, shit, I think he was already out of high school. But yeah, he was on that blood shit real hard. He was on it real hard. I remember one time, matter of fact, me and Amin met him at the same time. So if I was 14, yeah, Amin probably was 13. But yeah, we met the older brother and we went over his house and shit. We was kicking it. And I remember he had like some shit that almost looked like an altar. And it had all this blood stuff on it with the flag and all this other stuff. And I mean, he was just real militant and like real serious about that shit. You know what I'm saying? And I just remember like, damn, like, bro, really serious. He the first nigga I really met on that shit, you know? Other than that, like, we just know about Crips and Bloods through the movies and stuff like that. But I had never met anybody that really was on that in real life. But yeah, the first blood person I met, though, yeah, it was probably like, yeah, 03, 04, some shit like that. Yeah, but the Crips and the GDs, they were first. Now, as far as when all this shit took over in Clayton County, the blood shit really took over in Clayton County more in like the mid to late 2000s. The mid to late 2000s. Cause you know, at that time, like I said, everybody still Hit Squad, 220, Southside Mafia, or, you know, and the hundreds of other, you know, street crews that was around. But I do remember when Gucci Man came out in like 04, 05. I ain't gonna lie, that nigga Gucci, or maybe that was just, once again, maybe this just was me and like the niggas I was around, but yeah, that Gucci from like 05, 06, 07, 08, 09. Let's say that Gucci Man and from 2005 to 2009, man, that shit was over with. That shit was over with. That shit had a real powerful influence. And see, Gucci and them, they from the east side, and I think they was already on the blood shit. Because Gucci Man, he's much older than I am. But they was on that shit. Like when he had that blood in, blood out on that, when was that? That was on Isotat 1. Yeah, when Gucci Man had that blood in, blood out on Isotat 1, I think Isotat 1 came out, had to been like 06, 07. Because I think Isotat 2 and Bit Broke Records, I think that came out in 07. Yeah, like, yeah, some shit like that. Yeah, but when he came out, man, yeah, Gucci took over with that shit. Because back then in the city, like, everybody was either, like, rocking with Gucci or rocking with Jeezy. You know what I'm saying? And I remember at the time, you know, I liked both of them, man, but Gucci, like, that shit was just on another level to me, you know. But in the city though, see, I mean's uncle and some of the other brothers from the city. Rest in peace to brother Polo. You know what I'm saying? Rest in peace to that boy, the congressman. You know, Slit Puller, and some of the different guys that I was with, CTE. You know, and they was also, you know, with the BMF shit too. Like a lot of those BMF guys, I remember them being around, and they had some Crips with them. This would have been like their early 2000s, because the BMF guys, they had billboards actually. You know what I'm saying? I remember seeing one of their billboards with my own eyes on Terra Boulevard. Yeah, them guys had billboards, but I think that some of them was on the Crip shit, but they were from out of state. So the Big Meech, he from what, Detroit? So yeah, he got California guys and shit. As a matter of fact, I think Big Meech, you know, I think he ended up coming out there. One of his plugs was from California or some shit. So yeah, the BMF, I ain't gonna lie, I forgot to mention them. They had a big influence too with the Crip shit. Yeah, but see, once these guys, they much older than me, so yeah, like when they was doing all that, once again, I'm still damn near probably playing with toys because them guys much older. But yeah, but with the blood shit though, when Lil Wayne was doing it, and like that same period, when Wayne was doing that shit, like I say, yeah, 06, 07, 08. Really when Wayne was going ham. When Wayne and Gucci was going ham with them mixtapes, that's also when the blood shit, you started to see it a lot more. And also too, when Smeezy and Bloody J, you know, once again, boys coming from Clayton County, coming from Riverdale, when they started going more in the inner city, in Summerhill, Zone 3, they was doing the ABG shit, Major Grams. Matter of fact, me and Smeezy was talking about that in the interview. I got some work coming out with him. But yeah, Smeezy, I was asking him about that. Smeezy can tell you about the blood history in Atlanta. He was part of it. You know, that was like the late 2000s shit. So by this time period, that's when I went to college. Yeah, that's when I went to college. 07, yeah, that's when I was a freshman. So when I was coming back to the city and coming to Clayton County when I was coming from break, yeah, they was all turning up then. They was going stupid ham. Cause that's when yeah, cause Gucci and Walker was rapping and Smeezy was rapping with them. Bloody J was rapping. They was with Rocco. Like I say, the whole ABG and all them. And then at that time too, a lot of the Hit Squad and Southside Mafia, they had made amends during that time period. So they was able to, you know, come together on some stuff. Cause Smeezy and Walker was the, you know, once they laid the olive branch, it was over then. You know what I'm saying? Like, that's when that shit went real crazy. But yeah, that's when I started to see though some of the older Mafia guys and the Hit Squad guys and different people start to do the blood shit. Yeah, that was more the late 2000s. That was the late 2000s when you know, like I said, 07, 08, 09. You know, some of them probably before that. Like, you know, some of them probably on some 05, 06 type shit. But most of them, though, they probably more like 07, 08, 09. That's when the blood wave really took over. Not only Clayton County, but also Fulton County. You know what I'm saying? So, yeah, I'll say, yeah, probably. Let's go ahead and say, yeah, we'll say 05, 06. Because I'm going to throw them older guys with the blood shit, see, they could have been on that shit, like I say, damn near earlier, mid 2000s. I just wouldn't have known. But majority of Fulton and Clayton County, though, for niggas that's maybe in their late 30s now, yeah, I say, yeah, 07, 08, 09. That was the golden era of the blood shit. And that's what spawned a lot of what, you know, happened in the 2010s. You know what I'm saying? All the way to the 2020s. Because most of y'all may know about the blood stuff in Atlanta from from the YSL, you know, in the YFN case and stuff like that. But it had been around for a while. Yeah, Young Thug, you know, over in Cleveland, Zone 3. But the older guys, they was already on the blood shit before him. Same with Lucci. You know, because Lucci not that old. There was older guys already on that blood shit. Because like I said, the inner city of Atlanta, Zone 1, Zone 3, certain parts of Zone 6, them older dudes that's probably in their 40s, some of them probably even early 50s. Yeah, them niggas already was on that shit. You know, us young niggas, we didn't know nothing about that stuff. But yeah, them niggas was on that shit, for sure. For shit show. But yeah, man, this was just a laid back video, you know, just talking about some history. You know, that's all, man. And hopefully it was entertaining, but y'all stay tuned for the next one. We out.